Welcome, Buff fans, to a bye week edition of the podcast with Matt Smith. And Matt, Buffs coming off of another loss, three in a row, but at least they look better. I mean, they were competitive, and it was a one-score game, and they could have won that game. So at least it was it's a better narrative after this week than it was the previous two.
Yeah, I mean, a loss is a loss, and certainly it's a disappointment, but
Yeah,
we understand what time it is right now. We're looking towards the future here, and that's why Julian Lewis started, even though I think, ironically, he has worked himself into becoming their best chance to win throughout the course of the season, which I think is a testament to what they've done with him and to him for growing up a little bit, because we know from what we've heard behind the scenes that certainly, you know, up until very recently that was not the case. And so that was a really big step forward for the program. So we evaluate the loss and the fact that there's a lot of the similar problems that have plagued them throughout the year. However, it was very good to see them stop the bleeding, because if
yeah,
you end the year just getting blown out time after time, this thing is probably over. I don't
yeah.
even think even Coach Prime, not that they would get rid of him, but there's just no legitimacy to a team that would get, smoked like five consecutive times to end the
Yeah.
year. So I
I
think
would
it's
I would say slow the bleeding. It's still bleeding
yeah,
a little bit.
for sure. I just think like you were hemorrhaging before,
Yeah,
whereas
right.
now,
Hmm.
okay, we've turned that chapter. 2025 is over. It was a disaster. It was a disappointment. It was a failure in many regards, but now you're all eyes ahead, because that's all that matters at this stage, really. I mean, now
Yeah.
that they lost in West Virginia, I thought they fought really hard to give themselves a shot. You heard well off media them talking about, hey, have to have it. This is our Super Bowl, that type of stuff, because, they wanted to make a bowl game. But now it's evaluation time. It's 2026 time now.
So let me ask you this and I agree with you, it's pretty much on to 2026, but how important would it be for them to get a win in these next two games? Because I think it would be. I think it'd be a big deal to not end this season on a five-game losing streak and to, especially this next one, ASU, you're coming off of a bye, get that one, and you say, you know what, we had a really horrible two-game stretch and we were able to reel it back in.
Yeah, I really think style points matter now. You've got to look like a competent operation, and I
Mhm.
think that's the most concerning part to me, is that when you stripped away some of the elite talent of last year, a lot of those issues that we saw the last couple of seasons were exposed because they didn't have those guys there to save them and cover them up. And you have to make it look like those things are getting figured out,
Mhm.
which I don't think they did a great job of against West Virginia. I think a lot of the same things popped up.
Mhm.
But that's got to be a real look in the mirror moment for Coach Prime, because there are some things here that he's not getting right. There are some things he is getting right, plenty of them. And this isn't to make it sound like everything's spiraling, but there are some things here that are preventing them from being truly legitimate in some
Mhm.
ways, that are starting to and have been exposed for everybody to see. And the
Yeah.
only way to rewrite those narratives is by to fix it on the field. So I actually think these last two games are really important, because you have to continue to help Juju get the most out of these 3 weeks. The bye week, Arizona State and
Mhm.
Kansas State. Now that reportedly, redshirt's not going to be a factor, and you asked Juju point blank the other day, do you want a redshirt? He's like, I want to play football, which of course he does. Which is where my argument comes in. That it's like, well, maybe the head coach could have helped him there, and he was going to start these last three anyway. There was a better way to do this, but we don't have to rehash that whole argument. We know about the injunction meeting coming up with the 5-5 on the 15th of December. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's interesting. They have a lot. Where I was thinking about kind of driving back to Pittsburgh the other day was, there's way more to figure out for next year than I would have guessed there would have been at the beginning of this season. And that's where my concern is. Are they actually going to be able to fix some of that? Because there
Yeah.
have been recurring themes that I think start with Coach Prime, and it's nothing against him. It's just some philosophies that I think he has to break.
Yeah. Well, to answer my own question real quick, I will say I think it's important to get a win, at least one, for a lot of reasons. One, you do stop that bleeding. You do stem the tide a little bit and say, you know what, we had a really rough stretch. We kind of gathered ourselves. I think it's important. Um, Roster retention is a big deal,
Huge.
and you want to keep a Juju. You want to keep a Jordan Seaton, right? You want to keep a Tawfiq Byard, I would think, guys like that. And you're more attractive if you go out and compete and you win a game, as opposed to if this were to fall off the rails and you're 3-9, you know, it looks different, I think, than 4-8 or 5-7 at this point. And I think you're less attractive to the guys even on your own team that you want to keep, um, as well as guys that you may want to bring in here. So I think it's a big deal for that because I think you've got to prove to people that because again, Matt, if they lose five straight, that'd be two times in 3 years that they've had a long losing streak to finish a season under
Mhm.
Coach Prime. That doesn't look good.
No, no, it doesn't. I mean, again, it's going to be hard to win these next two. I think even against
Mhm.
Jeff Sims, I think that's going to be a challenging game. Arizona State is just much further along, and they, quite frankly, are a better coach team than Colorado. And I would
Yeah,
say the same about Kansas State. So they may not be as far along, and they definitely had a disappointing season, but they're a better coach team right now for sure.
yeah,
So yes, it's at a bare minimum you have to be competitive. Like
yeah,
you can't get blown out. What you want to show and what you want to be able to take to the recruiting table this offseason is say, all right, we know we had a really bad year. You know, you can pin a lot of it privately on Caden Salter and Pat Shermer because both those guys won't be back. We're at least assuming that for Pat Shermer.
yeah.
And you can say, look at the sample size at the end of the year and what we were able to do with Julian Lewis. Look at him spread the ball around. Look at what Omarion Miller was able to do in this offense. We were able to open up the running game a little bit, even though they really didn't. It was probably their
Mhm.
worst game rushing the football the other day of the season. I don't know if numerically it was, but it
I would
felt
say
like
early it was. It got better. I
a
think I
little.
was I think I was showing you the numbers. Like very early, it was bad, and then all of a sudden, they started to pop some runs, and it
What
got
was it?
better
What did they
after that.
finish with? Still didn't finish. I mean, I know a lot of
Yeah,
the sacks came into
the
play
sacks
there.
came into play. They finished with 51 yards. Um, I think they were 6 carries, -1 yards as far as running backs go.
Hmm.
6 carries, -1 yards after that, and they were like 19 for 80 or something like that after that. The running backs,
That's good
so
because
so solid. Yeah,
I attributed a lot of that to the offensive line struggling
yeah,
too. That was
hmm
easily their worst game of the year, and a little baptism by fire there for Juju getting hit. That was his welcome to
yeah,
college football moment, was what
yeah,
that was. I mean, get ready to take all these hits, and so that's the type of thing that you want him to experience. What he needs to work on this offseason, getting in the
yeah,
gym, making sure he's able to sustain, because next year they got to replace a lot of offensive linemen. They really, I mean,
yeah.
you got Jordan Seaton and you're going to have some depth there, but if you're going to go get starters in the portal, it's going to be mostly a new group up front, right? I mean,
Well,
you got a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
seniors.
I mean, it's gonna be a lot of new players all over the place, but I mean, they lose like 7 offensive linemen, I think, that are in their last year of eligibility. It's 33 guys overall on this roster out of 102 that are in their last year of eligibility. There's another couple guys that could be like if Atafi Thomas plays one more game, he's done. Um,
Mm,
which why I don't know why you would play him. He can
mm-mm,
still redshirt. DeKalen Taylor is one that looks like he's getting close to coming back, but at this point, I don't
no.
know why he would want to play again. They don't need him, so
And
he's the
he can
guy that can.
redshirt, I think,
Yes,
right?
yes, he can redshirt and come back. And so, and there's somebody else I can't remember who it is. Oh, Terrell Timmons is a guy that it looks like he's redshirting because he's clearly been practicing and not suiting up or not making the trip. My guess is that he's told coaches, I'd rather redshirt. I'm not playing a key role this year. I've got 1 year left. So my guess he's redshirting because he looks healthy in practice. So you got guys like that. But Matt, I wrote a story the other day. You take out the 33 guys that are for sure in their last year out of the 102, that leaves 69 on the roster. And based on what CU's done over previous years, they've had at least 30 some guys leave in the portal every year. So you let's guess half those guys leaving the portal. Now you got 34 guys left or whatever. You have 70 new players next year. I mean,
And,
that's just
and
that's just the way it's and that's the way it was always gonna be. But if this thing finishes 3-9, you might need 80 new players next year.
And the other part of that is the guys, your top targets on your board are going to be harder to get, right?
Right.
You've got to be able to show them some sort of proof of concept. Like
Right.
getting Juju going and making him look good is probably the most important part
Yeah.
of the end of the year because clearly the pitch moving forward is we've got our quarterback. We just need you, and we're going to build around
Yeah.
you. And getting the quarterback is the hardest part. I mean, that's the one thing I said last week leading up to this game. And I know there's been tons of negativity and, picking apart of what's going on, as happens with a losing season and a program that is struggling. But the quickest way out of this, undoubtedly, is for Juju to be as advertised and to live up to the hype. That's the fastest way. You could
Yeah.
go hire whoever you want in the country. The quickest way is for that young man to be successful on the football field. And if they can find a way to show that even more, good start. Now stack one or two more and
Mhm.
what you don't want is a situation where he's making a lot of mistakes. And I think the mistakes he made on Saturday were more of a result of inexperience and
Yep.
lack of reps, as opposed to just bad throws and bad decisions and bad mechanics. And yeah, there's stuff to work on there, undoubtedly, but he looked comfortable and he looked like um, he fit the part,
Yeah.
he fit the part. And that was what I
Yeah.
wanted to see. That
Yeah.
was the most important thing. And Coach Prime knows that as well. And after the game said, look, he's got to get rid of the ball more. And there's a couple of times where he did take some sacks, but he also is just learning on the fly and also not getting the best coaching.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Like year one for him, the most important part of this entire season is what you're going to be able to get out of the last three games because now you're in there. Like getting ready and maturing, I think is a big deal. But as far as like skill goes, I don't know how much he got out of the beginning of this season. I think it's more mental skill that he's developed and now just getting him on the football field, Coach Prime said it to the Kelsey brothers. I don't know how much you learn on the bench, right? So at a certain point, you kind of just got to toss this young man into the deep end, and he started swimming the other day, and they nearly had a shot to win, but
Yeah.
you kind of expect those things with a young man like that. Key situations, 2-minute drill, needing to get play calls in and out quickly, get everybody lined up. They struggled with the things that I expected to see him struggle with on Saturday in West Virginia.
Yeah. I would say with that comment that he made to the Kelsey brothers, though, I think that applies more to a cornerback than a quarterback, wouldn't you say? Because I think a young quarterback can learn a lot by sitting,
Sure.
and a lot more than a young corner could. Because a corner, a lot of it is that you've got the skill. Watch obviously you watch the film and learn the receivers, but there's more nuance to that quarterback position, and so I think that it's been probably huge for Juju to sit and learn a lot this year. And people can have their opinion on Pat Shermer, but he's learned from a guy that's coached quarterbacks for a long time. He's learned some things. And so, but yeah, the important thing now is how does he look? And I thought he looked good the other day. There was one pass that was picked off. It was called back by a penalty. And I don't even remember, how bad the throw was or anything, but that was the one bad throw that I remember him having. And, he only had one throwaway. So I thought he did a really good job, and he was over 300 yards until his last pass went for -3. So that put him at 299, unfortunately. But um, he's good, man. I mean, he's exciting to watch, and he's gonna be fun. I'm excited to see him against ASU and Kansas State.
Definitely. And another great opportunity for him to grow. I thought he
Yeah,
handled himself really well in the press conference. Coach Prime was like, be easy on the kid. I mean, after 3 years, you'd think that they'd understand. We're not attacking these kids, at least not
right.
us, not the ones that are in that room. Of course, it's we're not intimidating you, me, and Adam. I mean, that was basically who was there the other day.
Yeah,
That is not a very intimidating group. So yeah, I think that once he gets his roots a little bit more and starts to feel the confidence of what it means to be the guy and have the keys, it'll change. And leadership is a problem on this team, and I think he's somebody who can work his way up into that.
yeah,
But even still, that's one element of all of this that Coach Prime has been, at least in his culture, and I know he hates that word because everybody has a different definition, but in the culture they've created, leadership is a quality that they highlight a lot. And for
Mhm.
them to have missed so significantly in that regard this year and really failed to develop that much at all outside of a few positions during the season is an indictment on the process in some way, shape, or
Yeah,
form. It's up to them to figure out what it is. So moving forward next year, like, yeah, I mean, having Juju there is important, but Omarion Miller needs to get his act together. Like he's made some plays and is starting to have a really nice back half of the season, but mentally he's got to grow up a little bit more. Guys like that
yeah,
just have to start pulling their weight. And that's one of these, elements of I've been thinking about it. And I know there's been a lot of discussion out there about, tradition and the fight song and stuff like that. And the one thing that I think helps build leaders is having that program identity, not just based in the way you do things, but there's some tangible things like, why does the fight song matter? Why? Because you get guys to be leaders and to bring younger players in and take them under their wing. Does it make a difference at the end of the day for winning and losing? No. I mean, you'd be kind of a fool to make that argument, but I think it's important to build young men. Right? Why do we care about this place? You can't just care about the name on the back. You do have to care about the name on the front. Because when things aren't going well, then it splinters unless you have a group that's, working towards a common goal. And I
yeah,
think when things went poorly this year, they had nothing to stand on.
yeah,
And that was obvious. It doesn't mean that you're singing the fight song, so everything, is hunky dory. And it's no, it's, this is the way we do things so that I'm going to show you the ropes. And then the next guys that come in, you show the ropes. And
right.
that's kind of how you develop leaders and what matters in this program and who do we hate and, all that type of stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, it's a transient nature of college football and it may be a 1 year deal, but teams around the country are all doing it. Colorado's
Yeah,
the one team that really isn't doing that type of stuff. So maybe at the end of the day, it's not all that big of a surprise because what do these guys have to cling to? Work hard, be smart, fast, tough, disciplined with character. That's not feel it, see it, touch it, taste it, tangible. Like those are concepts and mentalities. And yeah, you've got to develop all that, but there's also some things that you can do to help build that. And so whatever it looks like moving forward, they've got to find a better way of getting players to care about where they're at right now. Because I think they care about playing for Coach Prime, but college football is a lot more than that. And I think,
yeah,
especially when you're turning over the roster, I mean, let's just think it's been 3 years. They've brought in and out of the program, what, over 150 kids now?
yeah, something like that. It's got
Something
to
like
be,
that.
yeah,
How do you expect there to be tradition when you don't have any of the same faces? That's why,
right.
the transfer portal is what is this, year what, 6, 5?
Uh, I mean, really in earnest by year four, 4 or 5.
And so the reason I bring that up is I think we're still learning about it, especially with the way the rules are changing. And Coach Prime was on the leading edge of the early part of the transfer portal and understood that there is actually a way to flip a whole roster in a year that a lot of guys just aren't taking advantage of because
Yeah,
college football has been a lot more delicate and sensitive in that process.
right.
But now I think there is also some learning to take out of this. Like you can build a team through the transfer portal, but if you're not building them around a core of players that are solidified, understand what you want to do, are supposed to be the guys, I don't know how effective it's going to be overall to really compete at the highest of levels because you have to have some sort of foundation in place. And the one thing that I don't believe has been there this year at all at any point is a real foundation and a heart and soul of this team. It's just kind of, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that. There's an it factor about this group that's missing, and it's probably hard to do that in the portal every single year. So moving forward, if you don't have that group, you've got to find a way to develop guys into being that core foundation. And I think there's some potential on this team to develop that. Is it enough? I don't know. But I look at Signetti, and everybody points to Signetti at Indiana. He did the same thing Coach Prime did when Coach Prime got to Boulder. They brought all the kids with him from JMU, from James Madison. Like he had a core of guys that had been in the system that they had developed that know what they're looking for. Coach Prime had the same thing. So you just had to fill in around the edges. Year one, they were late to the game and they didn't do the best job and they had to win a few games and show that Travis was who he was and Shador was who he was. And the next year it got better. But then no one saw that there were guys coming up behind him. It was like we knew that there wasn't anybody behind those guys. They were like one deep at a lot of spots. And so there's got to be an element to that where if he's really going to stay here, they've got to find a way to develop real leaders and a foundation from within.
Yeah. And yeah, there was a lot there. I will say, going back to Juju, as far as like, when Coach Prime says go easy on him, this is about as easy as it's going to get for Juju as far as talking to the media. He's the golden boy right now.
Yeah.
In the, he's the one guy the Buff fans are hanging their hat on and saying, this is who we want to see. That's who they want to hear from. And so I don't think he's probably the last guy any Buff fans are on right now, getting on as far as blaming for the season. So this is a great time to hear from Juju. And I think this is a great time for Coach Prime to be putting him out in front of the podium and say, yeah, take these questions, start being that leader. And because this is a guy you want going forward, right? And when you look at rebuilding this roster for next year, look, they gave a lot of money to two different quarterbacks this year, right? Now you only have to do it to one. Take some of that money you gave to Caden, let's give it to Juju, make sure he stays, right? Um, and so that's gonna be interesting to see what they do with that. I'm curious to see if Juju stays, because that's such a huge part of getting this team going. As far as the fight song and stuff goes, Matt, I think it's important because a lot of things you said, but like, um, there's got to be something bigger you're playing for, and I think the fight song might be more important now and people, I know I get people are like, oh, the fight song, whatever. I think it's more important now, maybe than it even was during the days of Chad Brown and Matt McChesney, these guys that have been very vocal about how much it means. It meant a lot to them, but I think it might mean more now as far as like getting a group together. Those guys kind of grew up together and they learned that and they were a brotherhood. I think you almost need the fight song to help develop that brotherhood, and not just the fight song, but like the traditions. Um, it needs to mean something to these guys to be a Colorado Buffalo. And I know some people are going to say that sounds cheesy and everything, but it's not. I mean, you look at, uh, I guarantee you, there's players at Ohio State that it means something for them to be an Ohio State Buckeye, right? It means something for you to be a Michigan Wolverine or whatever. Um, I think there's too many guys on this team, and Coach Prime's alluded to it. Bucky's alluded to it. There's too many guys on this team that just they don't care about Colorado. They came here because that's where my opportunity is. That's where my money is. They don't care about being a Buffalo, and I think they need to develop that a little bit. That's on the staff to
Yes.
to develop that pride. It's on those leaders, and get a Jordan Seaton, get a Julian Lewis or whoever to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Coach Prime's got to lead that and say, guys, we are going to sing the fight song. We're going to learn the fight song and, you know, learn it in spring ball. And we're going to sing it at the end of the spring game. We're going to sing it at a pep rally, get to know this song. And it's a big deal because when you hear these older players like a Chad Brown or Matt McChesney talk about it, there was some pride in when they would win a game, they could not wait to sing the fight song, because it meant that they did something together as a brotherhood. This team doesn't have any of that, and it's going to be harder to do in the portal era. That's why I think you need some of those traditions because it's going to help build that brotherhood.
And I think I want to take that a step further. And, it's really not just about the fight song. To me, it's
No,
about the alumni culture.
yeah,
To your point, and I want to validate what you said, it has to matter from top down. And Coach Prime cares about some elements like the bare minimum of the traditions. He knows about Ralphie, right? There's some parts of that. Nebraska, CSU. He did a great job when he first got here, diving in head
yeah,
first. It's personal, all that stuff. They've lost their way a little bit in that, to be fair. And I think of a guy like Philip Lindsay. Like, why is Philip Lindsay not addressing the team at a team meeting? Why has he not been really welcomed with open arms into the program? Cephalufau, why have you not reached out to a guy like that? Like, I respect all the Hall of Famers. They bring an incredible perspective. It is valuable. Yeah, when you're losing all the time, it looks fruitless and it looks maybe a little overblown. But if you were to mix that in with a Nate Landman type of a guy in the offseason. You know what I'm saying? Like guys like that who have played here and understand what it means to be here to try and create some of that because I think that's been missing. And do I think it was essential with Shador and Travis? Not really. I mean, those guys were going to be who they were no matter what. They didn't really need to sing the fight song. Now, moving forward, would it do you any
yeah,
harm? Would it do you any harm? Like I
right.
don't know what you think you're hurting there. You know what I'm saying? It's not just the fight song. There's many other traditions, that
Well,
exist. And
yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And locally, you got Phil Lindsay that's right down the road. Alfred Williams is one of the best players that's ever played in this program. He's a college
Chad
football Hall of
Brown,
Famer.
Charles Johnson.
Chad Brown, right down the road, right? Charles Johnson would be unbelievable because he's not only an eloquent speaker, but um, he epitomizes a lot of what this team is. Is like he wasn't the star player, but he was needed at times to fill the role, and he played a huge role in a national championship. And so you got all these guys down the road. I mean, go back even further. Dave Logan, was a star in the '70s. Come get a Dave Logan and come talk to this team. And so you've got all these guys that are right here. It doesn't need to be the Hall of Famers all the time. And I think these guys need to hear from guys that
Yes.
are passionate about being Buffaloes because while a Ray Lewis can make a passionate speech or a Champ Bailey or Randy Moss, uh, they weren't Buffs. And
Right.
I think there's always so many Hall of Famers I think you can hear from. I think it's important to hear from some of these other guys and that have lived in this experience that you're in right now as a CU player. Is I've played here. I've played at Folsom. I know what it's like to run behind Ralphie. And Nate Lamon that said, "Look, I've been through some of the crappy times."
Mm,
Philip
mm.
Lindsay, as much as anybody can say, "Look, we were dog crap when I got to
Hmm.
Colorado, and this is how we got to 10-4 and winning the Pac-12 South title."
And here's
Stuff.
what matters to us. And this is why you
Yeah,
defend Folsom Field. And this is,
right.
all of that type of stuff. And again, that's from the head coach. He's got to
Yeah,
care about that. And he
yeah.
doesn't, which to each their own. And again, do I think this stuff is mission critical? I don't know if I would say mission critical, but it's important. And I
That's a good
think
way to
it's
put it, and I would agree with that.
right. Like, is it at the end of the day going to translate to wins and losses? No, but
I
it
think it could.
matters.
I think it could.
I mean, yes. I mean, it's just like, is it directly just because you're singing the fight song? No, but it mean
No.
you are more connected as a group. There are things you
Hmm.
bond over more. There's, more rites of passage in Boulder than I think that they're taking advantage of right now. And some of that stuff helps bond you as a group when you don't have the core and you don't have the foundation and you don't have the leadership. That's the type of stuff you point to where it's already structured into place. You know what I mean? Like it's all right,
Hmm.
Omarion, it's your junior year. Everybody else is leaving. You're leading, singing the fight. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the type of stuff
Yeah.
where it forces guys to grow through the tradition. And I know that Coach Prime isn't familiar with a lot of Colorado alumni. I know he doesn't respect the level a lot of Colorado alumni have played at, but it doesn't mean that they're not important. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be involved. And quite frankly, like if you were to cut Philip Lindsay open, he bleeds black and gold. That's a guy who I'm extending an open invite to, and I'm telling him, whenever you want to be here, you just call.
Yeah.
Open sideline, whenever.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the type of stuff. That's how you work these guys into your alumni network. And yeah, Coach Prime's got a gazillion connections. And do these guys need to know every Colorado player? Not necessarily, but I think it is important because there's a growing angst amongst some of the alumni that it's like, look, we get that we're not the most important thing ever, but we care about this place a lot, and somebody has to within
Yeah.
those walls. And you can't care about the results more than you care about where you are, because if you care about where you are, then you're going to start to just care about the results by osmosis. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because
Hmm.
you have pride in it and things like that. So I don't want to talk about that stuff too much more because, quite frankly, Brian, I don't believe any of that is going to change. None of it. I don't think and they're going to
Yeah.
instill any of that. I don't think they'll make a phone call. I don't think Coach Prime will take the time to learn what it means. I just don't think so. And that's up to them. But when things start to go poorly, this year they had absolutely nothing to point to. And
Yeah.
if it were me learning from this year, I'd be like, okay, we got to have something that means something. And like to your point, there's plenty of guys around here that have played for this university that got their ass kicked that it actually really does matter to, and that did end up having success here. And finding what that means, to bring that back into the program and create that brotherhood that's so important that in our opinion that and the reason why I say this is, Brian and I know a lot of these guys personally that have played here. They're good people. They're really good people. You want around these young men. And it's hard when you're a FCS transfer who's in your last year of school to listen to Ray Lewis come in there and tell you that you don't have what it takes and yada yada and you're not a team and all the well, show me how to be one. I
Yeah.
think there's some of that where that's not happening enough, and they're missing some of that connective tissue where, big moments, big situations, that's when you come through. And Shador and Travis and that whole group had already microwaved it. So I don't believe it was necessary. Bringing Philip Lindsay in to talk to Shador's group, I don't think really matters,
Right.
quite
Yeah.
frankly. Bringing him in to talk to this year's group, I do think would have mattered.
Yeah.
Getting Juju around some of these guys, putting Juju around Cepho and having Cepho, spend a couple hours with him and tell him what it means to be a quarterback here. And, Joel Klatt and, all these guys. And that's the other thing is all these guys would show up with bells on. Like
Yeah.
nobody's, upset or doesn't want anything to do with this. And those guys would be thrilled to help. And you don't know what you don't know. And I think Coach Prime doesn't know some parts of that or doesn't feel like it's important. And
Yeah.
that's up to him. That's just our opinion on that stuff from two people who have seen a lot of it.
I will say this too, that I think why it needs to change, uh, and we both agree it needs to change. But first off, I'll say, how cool would it be though if you're a player and a Philip Lindsay comes in or an Alfred Williams and you're like, oh yeah, that's the guy whose mural I see up in the IPF. I've heard of you. But I think one of the reasons why it needs to change, Matt, that I haven't really seen talked a lot about, and we haven't talked about it yet, is that um, when you involve the alumni, they're more eager to back you.
Mm,
And this program right now needs backing of the alumni. And that's who's getting upset is, the alumni say, man, not only are we losing, but you're kind of crapping on our traditions and things like that. And I don't mean just the players. I mean, the people that have some money, and some of those are players. But, when you're bringing in the tradition and all of a sudden, you've got the older fan that's like, yeah, this kind of feels like when I was in Folsom in the 80s and 90s, like, because they're singing the fight song and like it feels connected, then they're more willing to pay some money. You connect a little bit to the alumni, they feel closer to your program, they're going to give you more money, and I think
hmm
that's what CU needs, and so that's why it needs to change. Is it's not about singing a song, it's about college football is way different than the pros, and it's you've got to act differently in college football, and it's a fraternity, or you know, it's a long-standing brotherhood that like these guys. I remember talking to Chad Brown years ago about the 1990 team, and he's like, man, he goes, we were in each other's weddings. He goes, we still call each other when something happens and say, man, I'm going through this, or my daughter's graduating from college, and they still call each other, and that means a lot. So these guys are connected to this program, and they want to be connected to this program. They want to be up here helping Coach Prime and helping these players do the best they can.
And again, you don't have to do what they tell you, but gaining their perspective, I think, is very important because I
Yeah,
guarantee you they have good ideas. Why? Because a lot of these people have had success at Colorado. Some of
yeah,
them haven't, and maybe you don't talk to some of those guys. Like, I mean, you're not calling Carl Durrell. You know what I'm saying? Just
yeah,
I was tongue in cheek there, but
yeah,
my
yeah.
point was is you're talking to guys who want to help out and have good ideas and they have experience with what it means to be successful in Boulder. So while college football may not be the same, is if you're somebody who's rolled their eyes or has yelled at us this entire time we've been talking about this, I just want to pose this, for those people who say, why does it matter? Who cares? Is it going great right now?
Right.
You know,
It's not
like
working the way it's going.
it's not. And I said something on my video the other day that based upon the teams that they have, they've underachieved in all 3 years. It doesn't mean that 2024 they didn't surpass our expectations, but by the end of the year, you looked at the team they had, and the fact that they weren't in a Big 12 title game is crazy. The first year, the fact they weren't a bowl team, that's nuts. And last year, it's the same. So, like, let's not pretend that
This
things are
should
going.
have been the third straight bowl team.
Absolutely. And Coach Prime brought all that talent in to get it
Yeah.
done. They couldn't coach it there though. And there was some things that were missing to be able to kind of jumpstart to get it
Mhm.
there. And why is that the case? And all of it has to be reevaluated because, folks, it's not just as easy as saying, all right, we'll hire a couple of coaches, we'll bring in a couple of other players around Juju, and this thing will be fine. It's like, no. There's some fundamental things here that
Yeah.
have got to be fixed.
Yeah.
And Coach Prime said as much afterwards. There will be significant changes. I think it would be worth consulting some people that you haven't gone to before to try and force you to grow as a human being. Like, you don't respect Philip Lindsay? Why? He was the first undrafted 1,000-yard back in the NFL. That's somebody you should have. Oh, there's your Rudy. Like,
Right.
that's a Rudy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So take some time and care about it and think about it. And look, I don't know if they will. And again, we probably talked about it too much because I don't think that they will make those changes. I don't believe they think it's valuable. I don't think they care about it whatsoever. And quite frankly, I think they want their imprint on it over anybody else's, which I respect. But there's a way to, and it doesn't mean you're not getting credit and that you're going to those guys for help. You're just leaning on your community here that is already pre-built in for you as a support system.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. And it's only when you start to shield those guys out and put up walls and not tell anybody what's going on where people start to get like, like you said the other day, that's when people start to pry. And that's when people
Mhm.
start to dig because nothing's coming out and we don't have any answers, which is why I also put on social media, Coach Prime disappointed me last Tuesday by not just coming out and telling us who the play caller was. It doesn't need to be a state secret. There is no problem with just telling everybody. It would actually help him look better. I know he's trying to shield some of his guys, and the
Yeah.
truth is that it isn't all on Pat Shermer. It definitely isn't. There were failures everywhere. Failure to identify, failure to scout, failure defensively to game plan just the same as there was offensively. But what it shows is it gives some insights into what you're doing to try and fix this thing. So
Yeah.
while he says at the end of the West Virginia game, look, I've tried everything under the sun to get this thing back up and running. I don't know what that means. And I
Yeah.
don't need to know every part of what that means, but it doesn't matter to me. And this is the one thing I want to tell people. Like, I'm sure you've experienced much the same as I have. It doesn't matter how you and I feel about it. It doesn't. That's not what it is. I've got fans that sign up for season tickets every year that are starting to bail. I've got donors that have given this program a lot of money asking me, okay, so what's really going on?
Right.
Those are questions you don't want. And for the people who have just showed up who say, what does that matter? Keep pissing those people off and find
Yeah.
out what that matters.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy missing out on the Cal running back who you didn't get last, this offseason? There's a plenty of other examples of that, but it's like those are the types of things that small details that when you compound them, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And
Yeah.
there's some significant things going on right now. And to the people who go, oh, you don't think the donors know what's going on behind the scenes? Absolutely not. They have no clue. Nobody does except for them in the room. That's it.
Yeah.
And that works if you're winning. If
Yeah.
you're not, it doesn't work. It doesn't.
That's
And Coach Prime
yeah.
knows. Sorry, the last thing I'll say is he even said that rah rah well off stuff that only works if you're balling.
Yeah. And that's why I agree with you in that like last week, when his answer is, I might have made changes you guys don't know. You guys got to figure it out. It sounds much better. I know he in his mind is trying to protect guys, right? It
Mhm.
sounds so much better and it's much easier on him if he just says, you know what? It's not on Pat, but it's not working. So
We're gonna try something.
what I've done is I've brought in Brett, and Brett's going to call some plays and get involved with that and see if there's a different mind that can get going there. Because Brett's done it before for me, and we're just going to try something a little bit different. It doesn't throw anybody under the bus. It just says, I'm trying. This is not working. I'm going to try something a little bit different. It's it. I think that his heart is in the right place and his intentions are in the right place with what
Yes.
he's doing. I think that he doesn't come across as well as he thinks he does.
No.
I think that he would come across better if you I don't know if it's PR that somebody needs to get to him and say this is what you should say because this would go much better for you if you said this.
But again, it's also about he's not comfortable with losing. He doesn't want to accept a losing attitude. You want to
Yeah.
be optimistic. You want to have full belief. I agree with all that stuff. I will just say privately, when I made those opinions known last week, I had several people very close to the inner circle reach out to me in complete agreement. People who are defensive are more the people who don't understand
Yeah.
what's happening right now. Because the people who know what's happening, they're like, I don't know why he's not sharing it. Like it's like an insecurity thing. Like it's
Mhm.
showing that he's vulnerable. But the truth is we're all human beings, and he does have a larger than life persona. But if you think for a second that that hasn't that legacy of being the ultimate winner hasn't already taken a ding here, yeah, it has.
And the
Yes, it
ironic thing
has.
is that he's shown so much vulnerability already, and he's
Personally,
personally
yeah,
he's I mean he's opened up about years ago when he was playing for the Reds, and he almost took his own life.
right.
He was struggling, and the vulnerability he's shown through his personal trials and going through divorces and all the medical stuff that he's had. He's shown vulnerability, but in this regard, you're right. He's like nah. His response is I know what I'm doing, and things like that. It's like it's okay to show that vulnerability.
And you start to lose some credibility and clout when you act like that and your actions on the field show differently. Like
Mhm.
you and I didn't really talk about this a lot, but the timeout that they took when they're going down the field, this is just yet another example of misunderstanding the situation. You're
Mhm.
going down the field, you've got to get the ball back, you're down 10. You either kick the field goal way earlier than they decided to because you have to get the ball back anyway and you need two scores, or you're pot committed and you go for the touchdown. But what you don't do at all is call a timeout at any point because it's just a mathematical equation. Successful onside kicks that other teams know are coming, that's less than 5% chance,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Like I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. I have the numbers from the NFL for the last couple of years and they were 2% that
yeah.
were known. Getting a stop, even if you just gave up a touchdown drive, your percentage chances is so much higher. So in the post game, when you come out and go, I was thinking about taking a shot, but nah, the math doesn't add up. You don't get it. You don't understand.
Yeah.
And now you're starting to sound foolish and you're starting to sound like you're unqualified to make that decision.
And
And
then,
that's the
yeah,
truth. And whether or not it
yes,
was the be all end all, it's the same thing with the Julian red shirt. The fact that they didn't even talk about it ahead of time.
yeah.
What are we like? There is some very critical football 101 stuff that's going missed in this program. And if you come out and be like, yeah, maybe I made changes, maybe I didn't, guess you could find out. You're 3-9. You're making mistakes, man. You look
Yeah,
like an asshole. I don't know what
yeah,
else to say. And I don't believe he is that way. But there is again, I had some people that are very close to him reach out to me and say, yeah, I don't know what he's doing.
yeah,
And so I just and to confirm what I said, because a lot of people don't like to put that out there publicly, and it's not personal against him. In fact, my relationship with him, as far as the post game presser, the best it's been in 3 years. He and I are actually doing really well. So
yeah,
it's nothing like people are like, why don't you have that energy when you show up to the pressers? It's not our jobs to offer our opinions. We're trying to get his opinion. Our job's to offer our opinion in this format. It's not
yeah,
to stand up there and go, well, you realize that timeout you called at the end of the game was really stupid because you relegated yourself to an onside kick, which percentage wise, what do you mean the math ain't mathin'? You don't know
yeah,
what the math is. Like, that's not my job to sit there and do that for him. It's just not. It's not my job to get into a confrontation with him. It's his job because he's getting paid as one of the top 10 best in the country. We
yeah,
shouldn't be having these conversations.
yeah. And that, I mean, I didn't dwell too much on it because ultimately, they didn't make the stop and it didn't come into play. But what I had a problem with was, he called the timeout because like, well, we were thinking about doing this. In that situation, you needed to already decide before that drive started. If we get down there and it's fourth down, we need to kick the field goal and just take those points because we need a touchdown and field goal anyway.
Yep.
So that decision should have been made
Way
3 minutes
before.
before when the drive started. So, guys, if we get down there and we get stuck, then we need to kick the field goal. We obviously you want to get that touchdown first because then it's easier. But at some point you have to have that decision made already. And so yeah, that's where I had the problem with it. And he's not great at the timeouts and the time management. Bill McCartney was not great at it either. Um, you know, he had better players. He had a lot more talent that kind of masked that. Remember, this is Bill McCartney kicked a Rocket Ishmael in the national championship game. So there were some game management things that he wasn't
No
great at
one's
either. But
perfect, buddy.
no one's perfect, and so yeah, to me, yes, that's an issue. I think there's bigger issues to deal with than his game management. I mean, there's some more fundamental program issues that have got to be fixed.
And when you add that stuff onto it, like the strategy, the game plan,
Mhm.
constantly getting out coached by better teams, all of that stuff, when you add that to the fundamental problems, now we're in a situation where the only way, in my opinion, status quo, that he can actually build Colorado into a contender again is by getting elite talent that will supersede all of that. Otherwise, I am losing belief if they don't change the way they do things that they're going to be able to fix it, because there's some fundamental strategy stuff that they just don't understand and refuse to be open to changing,
Yeah,
and that's going to burn them. It will be the death of them if they don't figure it out, because you can get all the talent in the world if you don't have the right situations and the right plans and the right strategy and the proper understanding. Brian, it's not going to matter. It's not. Like
yeah,
you'll never win. And so again, I maintain that, in my opinion, Coach Prime is the best they can do. However, if some of these things continue, no, he's not. And they've got to fix it. They have to
yeah,
fix it. They
yeah.
do. They do. And I believe they can. It's just going to take a commitment that we haven't seen yet, so I don't expect it to. But I
Yeah.
know they can do it. Like, it's not that hard. It's a couple of phone calls, it's finding something else, it's relying on somebody that you may not know intimately to give you a recommendation, stuff like that, where operating outside of your own network might have to be the best path forward to really fixing what's plaguing them. But Juju is the quickest way to at least get out of it, to the point where you can win enough games for all the strictly Prime only fans to go, look at what he's done. You're nothing without him. Which, again, to the Prime only fans, Colorado was nothing without Coach Prime for the last couple of decades, for the most part, before he showed up. They had a blip on the radar, but they were more competitive at times. Like, he was 4-8 and is going to finish 3, 4, or 5 wins this year. We saw plenty of teams win 5 games. It's not like he's reinventing the wheel at Colorado. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's not like Colorado was just so agree. They were in 2022, and Carl Durrell was such a bad hire and did such a poor job with it that they fell apart. But in the past, in recent history, I've seen plenty of teams go 5-7 and miss bowl games. This
That's the
ain't
thing
nothing
is,
new.
3 years into his tenure, two of the seasons we've seen a lot of,
A lot,
and
tons.
we've actually seen better. I mean, 15, 16, 17, 18, yeah, well, 16, 17, 18, 19, that 4 year run. That was a compared to what this has been, they won more games. I
Yes,
mean, that was a 10-win season, which Coach Prime doesn't have, and it's three straight 5-7s, which he's not even going to reach 5-7, I don't think, in two of
no,
his 3 years. And so we've seen this before. What we saw in 23, what we saw in 25, what we're seeing in 25, we've seen it before. So last year was different, yes. The buzz and the notoriety and the Heisman, all this stuff, yes,
was unbelievable.
it's
September
unbelievable.
2023,
Yeah.
unbelievable,
But
unbelievable.
we are 3 years in, and he hasn't done anything different that his predecessors did. So we're still looking for the first coach in 20 years to lead them to back-to-back bowl games. Gary Barnett was the last time that happened, and what is it? So Hawkins, Embry, McIntyre,
Durrell,
Tucker,
Tucker, Durrell.
Durrell. So this is now the sixth coach since Gary Barnett did it, and nobody's taken the back-to-back bowls. And so, um, on the field results, yes, all the other stuff, I get it. It's nobody else would have done the buzz, all that stuff. On the field results so far, 3 years in, it's not much different than what we've seen.
It really isn't, outside of having Shador and Travis. And Brian and I will remember last season and even the year before for the rest of our lives.
Last year
Some
was
of
something we haven't seen. Last year was unbelievable.
and 2023, even, Brian, like, those are some of the greatest times. And even if Colorado didn't have ultimately the success and maybe they underachieved, I mean, make no mistake at how grateful we are for what they've come here and brought here, and that they chose Colorado and Colorado chose them. But I'm a little bit done with the whole, you got to be grateful thing. I'm really over that now because there's some simple stuff that's getting missed and it's being treated like it's insignificant when I don't believe it is.
Yeah,
So I am grateful for Coach Prime. I really enjoy Coach Prime getting to talk to him, every week. I think it's way more fun than it is a lot of other coaches. However, it's also very frustrating at times because everybody's going to do their own thing, and certainly was plenty frustrating with other coaches. But I'll say this: when those other coaches lost, they were more transparent about what was going on,
yeah,
and um, it buys you a little bit more patience with the fan base, in my opinion. And right now, I'll just tell you, the fan base heard we're bringing our luggage and it's Louis. The fan base expected a cavalcade of 4 and 5
right.
stars. That's not what's happening. They're not bringing in that type of talent. They're not. They're bringing in the same type of talent for the most part, a little bit on the higher side, in my opinion, because of the outliers with Seton and Lewis. So definitely better overall. But I would say it's not like some, canyon. And if it is, they're not coaching it well enough.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
not certainly not to be as much better than the other was. So look, this episode kind of digressed into maybe long term as opposed to what they did in the game the other day. But somebody asked me the other day, "Do you believe they can actually do it here?" And it's somebody I respected, and I said less so than I did at the beginning of the season, but not enough to the point where I'm willing to bail on it because I do believe they can. I
Yeah.
just, based upon some of their philosophies, you know, should you be recruiting the top players in the state every year? Yeah, Colorado doesn't have very good high school football talent. It's a bad state for it. But every year we got two, three guys that you should at least be on.
Yeah.
That's always been important is keeping the best players out of your state in your backyard. Those are the guys it actually matters to. Those are the guys who, the legacy guys, the Arden Walkers, who he's the only legacy buff. Andre Gerard's the only one with ties on the coaching staff. That's two players and two people in the whole program outside of maybe Rick George,
Yeah.
that really have ties to Colorado. That's not enough.
Yeah.
That's just not enough. Maybe at Ohio State or something, you can go in and, get the best of the best because everybody else is that way and it doesn't really matter. But here, you got to lean on that stuff a little bit more. And it'll be fascinating to
And,
find out if they do.
and where I agree with you, as far as like I'm tired of the be grateful for what he brought here, is that that doesn't fly right now when you're 3-7 and you're on the path to potentially 3-9, and your coach is being paid like a guy who's should be having you at 9-3, right?
One,
And so he's being paid to be different than his predecessors, and right now looks way too much like too many other years that we've seen at Colorado, for what we were told it was going to be and what we've expected it to be.
and a lot of that is Caden Salter's fault. He didn't play well enough, but guess who picked him?
Yeah,
It's the chicken or the egg. And so it's not all on them. These are just things that Brian and I have noticed that are missing from being around. Because I got news for everybody around there. No matter what you've seen on Well Off, Brian and I have been around a lot more than you guys have. We got a lot more of an informed opinion than you have, and we've seen it before, and we'll be here after they're gone.
well, and look,
So
before this season even started, you and I were talking about the roster, and we had concerns about this
big
talent they're
time.
bringing in is I
This
mean,
is nothing new for us. If you think we're just changing our tune because they had a losing season, that's why you were all mad at us in the offseason, is because we,
yeah,
we warned you that some of this stuff could be happening.
yeah,
They even went below what we thought.
yeah,
So, yeah, this isn't a surprise. And the other part is that we want them to do well here. I want
yeah.
Coach Prime to put his face in the Flatirons. I want to see Colorado compete for a national title. But why don't we end on this? Why don't you bring up unless you had anything else, why don't you bring up what you texted me when you were watching that football game
What's
the other
that?
the other day about Notre Dame?
Oh, I forgot that text. What did I say?
You
Oh,
said
it was why is it that when I watch other teams, 90% of them are doing things that Colorado can't do? It was something like that, right? Is that
Well,
what you're
you talked
talking
about
about?
Notre Dame specifically, and you're like, there. I mean, it's a giant gap between where
Yeah,
Notre
yeah,
Dame is and
yeah,
where Colorado is. And if you want to be taking, if Coach Prime, if we're going to hold Coach Prime to his standard, not just the standard of yes,
yeah.
he's rebuilding and the one that we get to pick in the narrative, you got to go off what the head coach says. That's how you
Yeah.
hold people accountable. And you
That's
were
where
like,
he expects this team to be. He expects this team to be able to go into South Bend and compete and win a game, right? That's where he wants his program.
100%. And for fans who are like, look at, the 1-11, we did. We were there. We
Yeah,
watched it. You went to
yeah,
every game. I watched every game. I was covering other things that year.
yeah,
The point was that it's the Grand Canyon of a gap between Colorado and Alabama and Colorado and Notre Dame. They really haven't done much to close the gap. And in year 3 of Coach Prime, yeah, you lost Shador and Travis. I fully expected them to be way closer to at least Big 12 contention consistently than they are. I mean, right now he's close to where he was at the end of 2023, and it might even be worse because you're not heading into the next year with Shador and Travis,
yeah.
even though we think Juju's a player and you can build around him. But it might even be ending on a worse note. It's going to be harder to build up around because all of a sudden you don't instantly have draws in the portal. Like you're going to
Mhm.
have to put in some sweat equity and build. And I was looking at the schedule for next year, and yeah, the portal's got to happen, but you got a trip to Cincinnati for a senior Brendan Sorsby. You got to go across the country to play Georgia Tech. You got to go to Tempe and ASU and Kenny Dillingham, who's going to stay with another year of Sam Levitt, right? There's one other trip that
Well,
escapes.
two of the three non-conference are Power Four teams on the road: Georgia Tech and Northwestern.
Well, shout out! Can't wait to go home. I'll have to take you around and get some great food. But how about the teams that are coming in? Texas Tech with a senior Baron Morton next year
Mhm.
with that loaded team. Houston's coming in next year. There's it's not an easy schedule
Yeah,
next year, and so it's not automatically like you're just gonna be like everybody's gonna be like, oh, they got Juju. There's plenty of programs that got 5 stars.
and
You
and
gotta
the
you gotta offer something
yeah,
else.
and the thing is, there's always going to be a gap between Colorado and Ohio State, Alabama, teams like that. It's just the gap is massive and way bigger than Coach Prime
Thought it
expects
would
it to
be.
be, thought
Yeah.
it would be, and I think it's bigger than it needs to be. I think it's and to me the bigger problem is there's a big gap between Colorado and Texas Tech.
Huge
There's a
right
big gap
now.
between Colorado and Utah. Forget Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame. There's a big gap between Colorado and a Utah and a Texas Tech and a BYU. There's a big gap between, uh, you know, I mean, there's a gap. I don't know how huge it is. There's a gap between them and Arizona State.
Yes.
There's a gap between them and Kansas State. I mean, they are a middle of the pack at best Big 12 team, and the Big 12 is considered what at best the third best Power Four conference.
Yeah, at least secondary,
Yeah.
when it comes to being the best.
So they've got a long way to go. They talked about they changed it to the turf because they want to host CFP games in December, things like that. Um, you got a long way to go for that. I mean, get yourself to back-to-back bowl games.
And that
That's
isn't even a high bar to clear. I mean, in the grand scheme of things,
for Colorado it is though.
when talking about teams that invested the way that
Yeah,
Colorado did in their football program, that should be
yeah,
the bare minimum.
yep.
And
Mhm.
Coach Prime, he's like, "Do you think I wanted to be here? Of course not. Of course we don't. But there's
Yeah,
definitely some things that you could be doing to help yourself out that you haven't or have
yeah,
rejected." And I think they could. And so I really hope from a top-down perspective, he gets some other sets of eyes in here to help him look things over. And he talked about what he wanted to get out of the bye week in these next couple weeks. And, these are audition weeks. Do you want to be back with Colorado? Do you want to, get good tape for the portal? But I mean, shoot, if I were one of these guys on the team that was really serious about wanting to stay here, I mean, you treat these next 3 weeks like I'm not going to step 1 inch out of line because I know what this means. But
yeah,
at the same time, from a coaching staff perspective, he even said it. He's like, we got to evaluate who we want, and then we got to evaluate what the players are going to do. Because you
yeah,
said it, recruiting your own roster, it's priority number one right now. I mean,
yeah,
because you can go out and get whoever you want in the portal. If you don't keep Seaton and Lewis and Byard and Omarion and some of these and DJ McKinney for next year, like you're where's your foundation?
yeah,
Those guys should be your foundation. You should be doing leadership summits. You should be putting them in touch with the right people over the offseason to make sure that they develop into that. The stuff that they did not do this year that maybe they thought was going to just automatically transfer because they set the standard. Clearly, there needs to be a little bit more hand holding within the standard. And that's a testament to Shadur and
Yeah.
Cam and Travis and Shiloh and Nakai and Levante and Lejante and Jimmy and Will for being those guys. But as we've said many times, it's rare you find old school cats with this generation. You know, there's a lot of priorities and things that Coach Prime emphasizes that just really don't exist in society. So to develop that, you got to be a little bit more, you know, hands in the clay, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. As weeks go along, I mean, we got a lot more to talk about as far as like there's coaching staff changes that have to happen. There's a lot of roster movement that has to happen. So, and next week, obviously, there's games. There's a game to happen. So, Matt, we'll come back next week. We'll talk about Arizona State, the importance of that, and then probably get into more of what has to happen going forward. So, enjoy the rest of your bye week.
All right, buddy, you too.